sun dipped low in the sky, setting the fields ablaze with golden light. This peaceful farm, surrounded by whispering corn stalks and sturdy oak trees, had no idea what was about to unfold. Underneath that perfect veneer lay a tension thick enough to cut with a knife. It was just another evening, but not for Sam Collins, the farmer who had tilled this land for over 3 decades. Sam was a man of the earth, his hands rough and calloused, his heart tender beneath that rugged exterior. He had watched seasons change, weather storms, and nurture life from seed to harvest. But as night crept in, carrying shadows with it, a sinister plan was stirring in the minds of a ruthless gang of outlaws. The leader of this band, a man known only as Red, had eyes dark like chips of coal and an ambition that burned like a fire out of control. He felt trapped by his circumstances, desperate for a big score. So when he caught wind of the Collins farm and its rumored bounty of supplies, he didn't hesitate. In his mind, this farm was a treasure trove just waiting to be plundered. As twilight settled in, Red and 3 other men huddled beneath the gnarled branches of an old tree, studying their target beneath the faint glow of the moon. "We move in quiet," Red whispered, a dangerous glint in his eye. The others nodded, excitement coursing through them. But Sam was no ordinary farmer, and this wasn't just another day on the job. As he finished his evening chores, he felt a prickling at the back of his neck, a sense that something was off. The animals were restless, stomping and snorting as if they sensed the sinister approach of danger. Sam leaned against the fence, staring into the deepening twilight. He would listen to his instincts, no matter how much he hoped they were wrong. Just then the wind swirled rustling leaves as if whispering secrets of impending trouble. The shadows lengthened, stretching fingers of darkness toward the barn. Sam's heart raced. He grabbed his old shotgun, a trusty companion that never failed him. He crept toward the edge of the field, his boots crunching softly on the gravel path, every sense alert. Red and his gang stealthily approached, their eyes glinting with greed. They could taste victory, each of them hungry for a life beyond the endless toil of a criminal existence. As they rounded the corner of the barn, they didn't know they were walking into a trap of Sam's own making. Sam had prepared for moments like this. Growing up in a rough neighborhood, he learned early on how to defend what was his. He might be just a farmer, but he was a farmer who had lived through tough, unforgiving days. He positioned himself behind a stack of hay bales, his heart pounding, waiting for the right moment to spring into action. When Red finally stepped into view, his shadow sprawling ominously against the barn door, that was it, the moment had come. With a resolve that surged through him like lightning, Sam stepped out of hiding, shotgun raised. He called, his voice cutting through the stillness like a knife. The gang froze, shock paralyzing them. They hadn't expected resistance. Red spat, his bravado faltering for just a moment. Sam's eyes darted to the men standing behind Red, fear slowly morphing into gall. They could see the fire in his eyes, the fierce determination of a man protecting his home. "You picked the wrong farmer to mess with," Sam said, his voice steady. He didn't just see his crops or equipment in that moment. He saw years of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. Red, realizing he could not back down, gritted his teeth. "We're not leaving empty-handed, old man. Step aside or you'll regret it," he threatened, trying to regain control. But in that standoff moment, something unexpected happened. Sam continued to hold his ground, but he wasn't just a farmer anymore. He became a wall of resilience. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's not yours? This is my home." In an attempt to intimidate, one of Red's men sidled up behind him and aimed a crude weapon at Sam. The light caught the glint of metal and knife, but in that instant, something remarkable surged inside Sam. Memories flashed before his eyes. His daughter's laughter, the smiles of his wife over warm dinners, the joy of watching seedlings grow into fruitful plants. All of that was worth defending. With a fierce conviction, he let out a roar, a guttural sound that resonated with every bit of courage he possessed. The unexpected ferocity startled the outlaws. Red's bravado cracked, and in that heartbeat of hesitation, Sam seized the moment. He fired a warning shot into the air. The sound echoed like thunder, ripping through the tension and splintering the confidence the outlaws had held so tightly. Disbelief washed over their faces. Panic surged as they turned to flee, but they quickly found themselves surrounded by the very shadows they had underestimated. Sam had planned for this. He had contacted the sheriff earlier, having sensed trouble brewing. With every shot that rang out, the sheriff's posse was closing in from the opposite side of the farm, their horses galloping like thunder. They'd be on the Outlaws in mere moments. Sam shouted, feeling the momentum shift like a gust of wind. Realization hit the gang like a bucket of ice water. The fear that had momentarily subsided now surged back, washing over their faces. Red quickly waved his men back toward the trees, but it was too late. The sheriff's posse emerged, rifles raised, determination etched into their features. The sheriff boomed, a seasoned authority rolling through his voice like a wave crashing against rocks. The outlaws hesitated, torn between escape and surrender. With the sheriff leading the charge, the gang was outnumbered, their bravado melting away like morning mist. "You're surrounded," he stated flatly. The tension cracked like a whip, slapping the air with urgency. Red glanced around, fear mingling with desperation. He barked, trying to rally his men, but the unity they once shared crumbled beneath the weight of their circumstances. One by one, the outlaws dropped their weapons, realizing their grasp for easy wealth had cost them everything: their freedom, their pride, their very sense of survival. The sheriff stepped closer, eyeing Red with disdain. "You thought you could intimidate this man?" Sam, still gripping his shotgun, watched the scene unfold, a mix of relief and triumph washing over him. He held his ground, stepping forward just enough to let the sheriff know he wasn't done yet. "They thought they'd waltz in here and take my livelihood without a care," he said, his voice steadier now. "But I won't let fear silence me." The sheriff nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the strength Sam had shown. Tension was finally releasing, but the weight of the day bore down on them all, pressing against their shoulders like a heavy burden. As the outlaws were handcuffed and led away, the shadows began to recede. The moonlight poured over the fields like a healing balm. Sam breathed deeply, his heart still racing, but now there was a spark of victory igniting within him. He had defended his home, not just with weapons, but with spirit. The sheriff turned to Sam, offering a firm handshake. "You did good, Collins. I always knew this place was more than just a farm." With the adrenaline slowly fading, Sam felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. He was just a farmer, but he was also a man of courage, determination, and heart. He began to realize that the roots he'd sunk deep into this land extended far beyond the soil. They were entwined with love, protection, and an unyielding spirit. That night, under the blanket of stars, the farm stood still and quiet, cradled in the embrace of a new dawn. The threat had passed, but more importantly, Sam discovered that even the quietest among us could roar when faced with darkness. In his heart, he knew he would remain vigilant, ready to confront whatever came next. Each stalk of corn swayed in acknowledgement, the wind whispering a promise this farm was his domain, and no marauder would tame it. And so, life would go on. Sam would harvest grain, mend fences, and watch the sunset paint the horizon. But from that day forward, he wouldn't just be the humble farmer tending to his fields. He would also be a guardian, a man molded by the fire of resolve, vigilant against the shadows that sought to steal the light of what he loved. As the sun rose again, a new chapter began, one where courage stood tall in the face of fear, and with it, the promise of a farming legacy that would endure through thick and thin. The outlaws may have come with ill intent, but they were met with the spirit of something far greater, a man willing to stand and fight for everything he held dear. The moon hung low in the night sky, casting a silver glow on the fields, making the corn look like waves glistening in a vast ocean. Out here, everything felt serene, peaceful, until the quiet was shattered by the thumping of boots on dry earth. A group of 4 men crept forward, their eyes glinting with mischief under the cover of darkness. They were outlaws, hardened by years of living on the fringe of society, and they had set their sights on one unsuspecting target, a local farm that was rumored to hold more than just crops. Unbeknownst to them, this wasn't going to be an easy score. At the center of the farm was Ben Carter, a stoic man, weathered by the sun and shaped by years of toil. His hands told a story of hard work, calloused and strong. But it wasn't just his hands that forged a strong man. It was his spirit, a fire that ignited whenever he thought of his family and the land that had cradled their dreams for generations. As the men approached, they believed they were sneaking into a world untouched by their recklessness. They had plans, far-fetched dreams of escape and grandeur beyond their wildest ambitions. This farm, they thought, was ripe for the picking. Red, the leader of the Outlaws, hissed, his breath fogging in the cool night air. He was tall and lean, with a smirk that seemed to imply he had already won. "This place can't be guarded. Just a farm." Those words hung in the air, a dangerous underestimation of what lay before them. Ben had sensed something was off for days now. The way the crows cawed incessantly, the slight tremor in the breeze, it all felt foreboding. He didn't ignore these signs. He tuned into them like a musician calibrating his instrument before a performance. When he locked up for the night, Ben had taken precautions. A trapdoor behind the barn led to a hidden cellar, a spot where he had stashed away equipment and supplies over the years. But it was more than just items hidden from view. It was his fortress, a testament to his ability to confront the unexpected. As the Outlaws reached the barn, they moved stealthily, creeping like shadows. Ben, hidden in the darkness, peered through the slats of the barn wall, and his heart raced. He quickly assessed the situation, sensing the danger simmering just outside. "Let's split up and grab what we can," Red gestured to his crew, practically salivating at the thought of taking home a haul. As they fanned out, Ben felt the weight of the moment press down on him. He couldn't hesitate. His family, his livelihood depended on this. Yet in the turmoil of adrenaline and fear, Ben understood a profound truth. He wasn't just defending the physical farm. He was safeguarding generations of dreams. This wasn't just his fight. It was a battle for resilience against those who sought to take what was built. Drawing in a deep breath, Ben darted silently toward the entrance of the barn and paused again. He listened as the thumping footsteps grew sporadic and erratic. They were raiding his supplies, careless and loud. Outlaws expect a quick score, but they forget that an old farmer knows every creak in his floorboards. Nearby, Red and one of his men pried open the door to the storeroom, their eyes wide as they confronted rows of glistening jars filled with fruits and vegetables, treasures of Ben's hard work. "This is it," Red exclaimed, his voice low but excited. But Ben knew the truth. A glimpse of victory, even for a moment, doesn't grant freedom. He had to act, and he had to act fast. As Red and his crew rifled through the supplies, Ben quietly reached for the iron gate latch, mentally preparing himself for what was about to unfold. With a swift movement, he flung open the door. The sound echoed like a clap of thunder, scattering the gang's concentration. Ben stood firm, silhouetted against the moonlit backdrop, a vision of deep-rooted tranquility mixed with the fierceness of a protector. He commanded, his voice steady, cutting through the tension in the air. The Outlaws froze, turning towards him, caught in the act. Red's bravado faltered under the weight of Ben's resolve. He sneered, though the tremor in his voice told a different story. Ben stepped forward, revealing a layer of determination that ran deeper than the surface. Red's men exchanged nervous glances, and Ben seized the moment. "You have two choices." With each word, Ben felt the familiar rush, a browser's sense of self-assertion. Behind him, the land whispered its support, the trees stood tall, and even the animals stirred awake, the quiet creatures standing vigilant beside their protector. Red's bravado started to crack. He barked, clearly trying to regain his composure. In his focus, Ben knew that words often held power, the kind that could stir courage or fear. Red was too arrogant to realize how close he was to downfall. "You're right. I don't scare easy," Ben said, his grip tightening around his weapon, "but you should be afraid." Suddenly, a low growl erupted from the shadows as Ben's loyal dog, Rusty, burst forth. His fur bristled, ready to protect his master. The Outlaws flinched, eyes darting to the massive creature bounding at them. Ben took a step forward, emboldened by Rusty's presence. "You see, you're not just facing a farmer. You're up against a man who will do whatever it takes to defend what's his," he said, a steady resolve running through him like a river. In that moment, Red realized they had underestimated more than just the farmer. The odds were no longer in their favor. The gang began to back away, but there was still the matter of their pride and the stolen goods. "Your greed brought you here, and your choice will lead you away," Ben replied, his voice steady. Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, the outlaws turned their backs on Ben, slowly retreating, but Red couldn't let it end like this. He spat, but even that threat felt weak, like a child lashing out in frustration. As the gang hurried away, shadows melting back into the night, Ben lowered his gun and relief washed over him. He couldn't shake the tension in the air, but for now he had won. With Rusty at his side, Ben stared into the depths of the now quiet barn. The moonlight filtered through the gaps, illuminating the chaos left behind. Crates upturned, jars scattered. Each shattered piece told a story of defiance, the defiance of one man against a tide of chaos. And then something unexpected ignited within him, a glimmer of hope born from the storm. He embraced that feeling, knowing he had stood up for what was right. Facing down, those outlaws had reshaped him, igniting a fire in his heart for justice and resilience. Overhead, a blanket of stars sparkled like diamonds scattered across velvet. They reminded him of the countless nights spent working till dusk, planting seeds with his father, nurturing dreams one day at a time. Determination settled in Ben like a new seed taking root in rich soil. He knew he was part of a legacy that spanned generations, the fight for survival, the beauty of creating and protecting. Tomorrow would begin anew, not just for him, but for his family. And with that, as dawn broke along the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ben understood that life could throw any challenge his way. He was ready, prepared for the storms and the sunny days that lay ahead. As he surveyed the farm, he felt a profound connection to the land beneath his feet. It was more than just soil and plants. It was a tapestry woven with hard work, sweat, and love, a legacy worth fighting for. From that day onward, the outlaws wouldn't be just scattered spirits in the wind. They would be a lesson learned and illustration of both strength and vulnerability. Ben would be a guardian of this sanctuary, and no thief, no matter how clever, would ever deter him from protecting the life he'd built. Somewhere amidst the glow of dawn, Ben found peace. He stood resolute at the edge of his fields, knowing that they would remain just that, a thriving ground of hope and resilience, where every day brought him closer to the harvesting of dreams, safety, and the undying spirit of defense. Nothing, he mused, could happen here that he wouldn't be ready for. With those thoughts, the farmer's heart swelled with pride, not only for his land but for the courage that resided within him, a fire now kindled and ready to burn brightly against the dark, daring any threat to come and try. The distant sound of hooves echoed across the fields, cutting through the stillness of the night. The moon hung low, dripping silver onto the sprawling expanse of land. It was an unassuming farm, a patchwork of hard work and late nights, but beneath its calm surface, danger crept closer. In the cool air, 4 dark figures moved stealthily, their silhouettes blending into the shadows that enveloped the barn. Each step they took was calculated, driven by desperation, greed, and a desire to escape their bleak lives. Jesse, the leader, had a rough edge carved by years of hardship. He possessed a keen instinct for survival, but tonight it was twisted into something more sinister, a plan to raid the home of farmer Tom Turner. Tom was no ordinary farmer. He had tilled this land for decades, hands worn from toil and heart anchored in love for his family. His fields bore the weight of years' worth of dreams, and the thought of losing even a portion of that filled him with a raw intensity. The crops weren't just plants, they were lifelines, symbols of a heritage that ran deep. As Jesse and his crew approached the barn, their hearts raced with the thrill of potential riches. "This is it," Jesse whispered, exhilaration mixing with adrenaline. "Word is, he's got more than just crops." Little did they know, Tom had been alert to the lurking shadows for days. The chickens had been restless, and his old dog, Max, rarely left his side. Those instincts weren't just farmers' intuition. They were instinctual protective mechanisms. He'd lost enough in his life to know that danger sometimes wore a familiar face. That night, as the last rays of sun kissed the horizon goodbye, Tom prepared for whatever might come his way. He had set a trap, a clever little surprise that would ensure he stayed one step ahead of any trouble. As he moved silently through the farmstead, securing doors and locking windows, He felt that familiar, quiet determination swelling within him. This was more than just a home, it was his legacy. Jesse pushed the barn door slightly, heart pounding in anticipation. The creak of the hinges felt like thunder. Inside, the barn was dimly lit, the air thick with the sense of hay and the stored grain. As they moved deeper into the shadows, the gang split up, each focused on finding anything worthwhile to snag. Tom positioned himself behind a stack of hay bales, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could hear the voices of the intruders, muffled and shaky, but with an air of arrogance that sickened him. They distorted the spirit of effort that had defined this land. One of Jesse's men whispered, his voice barely audible, "Just keep looking. We need those supplies." "Tom isn't going to miss a few bags of grain," Jesse replied, his tone arrogant, filled with the reckless bravado that came from desperation. Ben's heart raced as he heard the men rifling through his belongings, each sound of disruption a reminder of what was at stake. He weighed his options carefully while keeping a keen ear on their movements. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He hadn't just prepared with physical traps, he had set up something more creative than that. He quietly unlatched a hidden compartment beneath the bales and pulled out a small device, a noise maker. With one swift motion, he activated it and placed it near the entrance where the outlaws had entered. Moments later, a cacophony erupted, a mix of loud barks and braying eerily echoing through the barn. The sound startled everyone. Jesse's men jumped back, wide-eyed. One shouted in panic, "Just a trick." Jesse barked, but in his voice, doubt began to seep through. Tom, still hidden, felt a surge of energy. This was his surprise. He carefully took a deep breath, positioned himself for the moment of confrontation, and stepped out from the shadows, determined to reclaim his peace. He called, projecting his voice with authority that echoed in the barn. The outlaws spun around, clearly startled. There was Tom, an unlikely warrior, gripping a shovel like a sword, his expression steady and fierce. "You think you can come onto my land and take what's mine?" At that moment, the fear in Jesse's eyes transformed into anger, and he bared his teeth like a cornered animal. He snarled, but even he could feel the tide shifting as Tom's resolve radiated through the barn. But Tom wasn't done yet. He had one last trick up his sleeve. Behind him, he activated an old farm windmill with a loud creak. The sound caught the men off guard again. It was like a war horn blowing into the silent night. Jesse shouted, his bravado beginning to slip. With that, Tom sprang into action. He charged toward Jesse and his crew, swinging the shovel with fierce determination. He shouted, channeling every ounce of strength he had. The outlaws hesitated, their plans unspooling like a thread pulled too hard. In their moment of shock, Tom didn't stop. He kept advancing, each step a declaration that he would protect what was rightfully his. Jesse barked, panic flooding his words as he realized they were no match for the fury of the farmer. The gang finally turned, sprinting desperately toward the exit. But Tom was relentless. With each passing moment, the shadows of doubt transformed into courage, and he sprang forward, forcing the outlaws out of the barn like mice scurrying from a cat. As they stumbled outside, Jesse fumbled for his escape, his heart racing. "We just wanted supplies," he called out, trying to regain control even as they sprinted into the moonlight. Tom stepped to the barn door, sunlight breaking the horizon just as dawn began to awaken. He could see the outlaws darting across the fields, losing their composure with every frantic step. But he didn't let up. He shouted after them, his voice powerful and unwavering, "You think stealing is trouble?" As the last figures of the outlaws disappeared into the night, Tom stood tall, rain pattering softly against the ground, a healing warmth. He had defended his home against fear, against those who would take advantage of the vulnerable. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving in its place a deep sense of accomplishment, resilience, and pride. But the victory wasn't without its consequences. He knew he needed to alert local authorities. Jesse and his men wouldn't simply vanish. They would regroup as they always did. He went back inside, retrieving his phone from the hook, taking a moment to collect himself as he glanced around the remnants of chaos left behind by the intruders. "Sheriff, it's Tom. I had a little incident at the farm," he said, his voice steady but edged with lingering adrenaline. "I need backup." The sheriff listened carefully, bringing reassurance to Tom's racing heart. "I'll have someone dispatched immediately to keep an eye on your place. You did a brave thing tonight, Tom." Tom let the sheriff's words sink in. He wasn't just a farmer, he was a protector, a guardian of not just his land but the very essence of hard work, family, and tradition sewn deep into the fabric of his life. After hanging up, he moved through the barn, each step familiar and connected. The chaos was unsettling, but it didn't overwhelm him. It stirred something deeper, a resolve to fortify his home. Before long, the sun broke entirely over the horizon, painting everything in vibrant shades of hope. The warm light spilled into the barn, revealing a space marred by the intruders but imbued with a newfound belief. As he looked out over his fields, the world awakening around him, thoughts of the outlaws fell away. They may have come to disturb his peace, but in the light of dawn, a greater assurance settled in. He turned toward the tasks ahead, the day stretching infinitely, and each chore felt like a part of a greater mission, strengthening the very roots of his legacy. Tom picked a shovel off the ground this time, not as a weapon, but as a tool. He wanted to rebuild what had been rattled, to create a lasting sanctuary beyond the day's intrusion. The earth beneath him felt invigorating, warm and alive. That day, he planted seeds that represented not just crops, but resilience and tenacity in the face of adversity. Each effort was a promise, a testament to the resistance against anyone who might think they could take that away. The world around him flowed with energy, his heart beat in rhythm with the land, solid and unwavering as the sun climbed higher. Tom knew life would present struggles, just like the one he had faced the night before, but he was ready. He was prepared to defend not only the soil but the very spirit of determination that defined all he held dear. And so, as the last light of day dipped below the horizon, Tom worked tirelessly, knowing that every seed he planted carried the weight of not just his dreams, but the legacy of every farmer who had ever tilled the earth. No outlaws, no darkness could ever extinguish that unwavering spirit. In each blade of grass and every root, a fire burned bright, a testament to hard work, family, and the relentless hope for a future that would not be stolen away. The sound of hooves thundered across the open fields as darkness settled in. It was an unusual sight on a secluded farm, where the night was usually alive with the soft sounds of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the breeze. But tonight was different. The air crackled with tension and the unmistakable feeling that something was coming. 4 figures emerged from the shadows, riding hard, their faces set with grim determination. They were outlaws, hardened men who wore their mischief like a badge of honor. At their leader's command, they slowed to a halt outside the barn, a weathered structure standing stoically against the night sky. This farm was rumored to be a treasure trove of supplies, a perfect target for those who lived on the fringes of society. Inside the barn, Tom Harris, the farmer, felt the weight of the world pressing on him as he worked late into the evening. He wiped the sweat from his brow, catching a moment's peace amongst the busy chaos of preparing for the cold nights ahead. He checked his corn and potatoes, ensuring everything was secure for the winter. Yet beneath the routine, a prickling fear danced down his spine. Tom had been farming this land for over 20 years. It was not just soil to him, it was home. He had poured his heart and soul into these fields, planting dreams and reaping hard-earned rewards. Yet that night, beneath the quiet facade, danger lurked ominously. "Let's grab what we can and get out," whispered Jesse, the leader of the band, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. He was short and wiry, with a sharp tongue and a sharper knife hidden beneath his coat. One of the others asked, glancing nervously at the farmhouse that loomed in the distance. Jesse waved him off, brimming with bravado. "Old farmers are all talk, you'll see." As they began to sneak toward the barn, they couldn't shake the eerie feeling creeping over them. Little did they know, Tom was anything but an ordinary farmer, and the surprise he had for them would change everything. Tom finished his last task, then stepped outside, drawn by an unease he couldn't shake. As he did, he spotted the silhouettes of the outlaws creeping closer. Instinct kicked in, sharp as a steel blade. He knew he had to act quickly. With a hurried motion, Tom ducked back behind a stack of hay bales. He had grown up in a world where trouble often found him, learning quickly how to defend what was his. As the outlaws pressed forward, he moved carefully but rapidly, grabbing an old rifle from behind the bales. It wasn't just for show. It was a promise to defend his home at all costs. He shouted, stepping into the moonlight with the rifle aimed steadily. Startled, the outlaws halted, their confidence faltering in an instant. Jesse looked back at his crew, confusion and alarm muddling his arrogance. He shouted, trying to regain his composure. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm warning you," Tom responded, his voice steady. Tom's demeanor stunned them. They believed a farmer would cower, a man tied to the land and burdened by his labor. Instead, this calm yet resolute man stood like an immovable tree against the wind, ready to defend his roots. "Just a little grain, old man," Jesse sneered, attempting to restructure the situation in his favor. "You won't even notice it's gone." "Wrong," Tom replied, his grip tightening on the rifle. "Those bags are my hard work, my family's future." Now fear mingled with anger in Jesse's voice. He shouted. In a swift motion, he drew a knife from his belt, but as he lunged, Tom snapped back, raising the rifle. "Try it," the farmer growled, his eyes fierce. The standoff stirred tension in the air, an electric current crackling between them. Jesse suddenly glanced back at his men, who were losing their nerve, looking less like marauders and more like frightened children. In that suspended moment, both sides were aware of what was at stake: survival, legacy, and the dignity of fighting for what was just. Tom's voice rolled out, not just as a warning, but as an affirmation of his life's work. "You come at me, you face the spirit of this land." Just as Jesse's bravado began to fade, an unexpected sound pierced the night, the echoing growl of a large dog. Out from behind the barn, Max charged toward the outlaws, teeth bared, ready to protect his master. The sight of a large, determined dog sent a jolt of fear through Jesse and his gang. They stumbled backward, voices rising in panic. Tom felt a rush of adrenaline. The tables were beginning to turn. "You should have thought twice," he shouted, raising the rifle once more. Without waiting for their response, he took a step forward, a grin creeping across his face. With that, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, an old alarm system he had rigged years ago for unexpected guests. As he pressed the button, a wild cacophony erupted all around them. Alarms blared, lights flickered on in the barn, illuminating the area like 1,000 startled fireflies. "Go!" Jesse shouted, panic seeping into his voice as their plan crumbled. They turned to make a run for it, not knowing how the traps Tom had laid out earlier would now spring into action. Just then, the barn doors burst open. The floorboards creaked ominously as in his rush to escape, Jesse tripped over one of Tom's cleverly placed hidden connections. A cascade of hay bales tumbled down, blocking their escape route. One of the outlaws shouted, their survival instincts kicking in. In the chaos, they fumbled, launching themselves over the toppled hay bales. Tom took full advantage of the confusion. With the noise pulsating around them and Max barking ferociously, he felt a swirl of energy. "You picked the wrong night," he called out, feeling the power of the land behind him. The outlaws were starting to scatter, but Jesse was determined. He tried to rally his crew, but it was clear they were losing heart. He yelled, though his tone was weak and desperate. With one last surge of adrenaline, Tom moved with purpose. He stepped down from the barn's threshold and stood firmly between the fleeing outlaws and their escape. Jesse was trapped, his bravado deflating like a balloon. He shouted, glancing back at his crew who were losing their nerve. Tom felt the strength flow through him. "This isn't just about me." The outlaws froze at the edge of the yard, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Behind Tom, the barn lights blared like a spotlight showcasing the standoff. In a final attempt to reclaim control, Jesse lunged forward once more, knife aimed towards Tom. But Max, reacting instinctively, leaped, knocking Jesse off balance. The knife fell from his grip, clattering to the ground. Tom bellowed, his voice reverberating through the chaos of the night. As if on cue, the sheriff and his deputy arrived, lights flashing as they pulled up on horseback. The sheriff called out, stepping down from his horse, surveying the scene with authority. With righteous defiance, Tom pointed toward the outlaws. The sheriff wasted no time, circling Jesse and his crew. With the sheriff present, the outlaws' bravado crumbled entirely. They had been cornered by fear, caught in their own web of wrongdoing. The sheriff rounded them up, placing handcuffs on Jesse with a steely expression. In the glow of the moonlight, with the chaos finally subsiding, Tom felt a rush of release wash over him. He had defended his home, protected his family, and stood tall against the very forces that threatened to take it all away. As the outlaws were led away, a sense of fulfillment replaced the tension that had creased his brow. Victory wasn't just about keeping his belongings safe. It was about the power of standing one's ground and the unwavering spirit of defending what's right. The sheriff turned to Tom. "You did good, Tom." Tom nodded, wiping his brow, still racing with adrenaline. "I wasn't going to let them take what I built." A sense of camaraderie settled between them, two men rooted in their objects of loyalty, one a farmer, the other a protector of the law. As they gazed into the distance, the sun began to rise, bringing warmth and light back to the world. It washed over the fields in golden hues, revealing a new day full of fresh possibilities. Tom stepped back into the barn, soaking in the victories of the night, ready to rebuild and strengthen what the outlaws had tried to disrupt. Within those walls, he could feel the echoes of resilience, each beam and plank telling a story of past battles won and battles waiting in the wings. And so it was the dawn of a new chapter. A farmer, once quiet and unassuming, now filled with the bold courage that comes from fighting for home, family, and legacy. As the day unfolded, so did the promise of life, growing stronger in the comforting embrace of the earth. Tom worked relentlessly, leaning into the soil, planting seeds that would nourish his family for years to come while greeting the horizon with resolve. Life would bring its challenges and storms, but long after the last echoes of the night faded away, Tom would stand taller, knowing he could face anything that came his way. The land would thrive, and so would he, lifting his spirit high against the sun. The story of an ordinary farmer who had dared to surprise the thieves and protect his life through courage and unwavering heart. The night was unusually still, the kind of silence that felt like a held breath. The stars blinked in the sky, but on the ground, danger was creeping closer. Shadows flitted between the rows of corn, silhouetted figures moving stealthily in the darkness. Four outlaws, eyes glinting with greed, were making their way toward the unsuspecting Turner farm. Jesse, the leader of this ragtag group, couldn't shake the thrill of victory he envisioned. The word was that the farmer had been hoarding supplies, a true goldmine for men like them. "We hit the jackpot tonight, boys," Jesse said, his voice low but tinged with excitement. "Grab everything you can carry." What they didn't know was that Tom Turner, the farmer they planned to rob, had eyes in the back of his head. Tom had spent years looking after this land, working too hard to let a fresh haul of trouble disrupt what was his. A sense of dread had settled in that evening as he noticed a few stray dogs acting skittishly, the way they often did when danger was near. Despite the quiet, something was amiss. Tom was no stranger to hard work. The lines on his face told the story of countless sun-soaked days spent toiling in the fields. He didn't have a lot, but what he had he cherished fiercely. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, he heard a rustle near the barn, a sound that sent his heart racing. Each noise was magnified in the tranquil silence of the night. Tom grabbed his lantern, its warm glow cutting through the fading light. As he moved toward the barn, a tingle of adrenaline coursed through him, not fear, but something far more primal, a determination to protect what was his. The outlaws reached the barn and paused. It loomed before them, an old structure filled with supplies. They began to sift through the crates, shoveling food, tools, and anything else they could find into burlap sacks. Jesse urged. As they worked, a sudden movement behind them caught Jesse's eye. The farmer, lantern in hand, stepped out into the dim light, his figure cutting a stark contrast to the black of night. Tom's voice rang out, calm but fierce. The gang froze. They certainly hadn't expected the farmer to show up, and the moment stretched thick with tension. "Looking for something," Jesse stumbled, glancing nervously at his crew. "Looking for trouble, it seems," Tom shot back, not backing down an inch. He held the lantern up higher. "You best turn around and leave." Jesse sneered, attempting to unshake his disbelief. "Oh really? You think you can scare us off with a lantern? The air crackled with tension as Tom's anger ignited. His voice resounded, growing stronger with each word. "I've faced storms that would break you, and I've fought hard for every inch of this land." The outlaws collectively lost their nerve, shifting uncomfortably as Tom's stance anchored the intensity in the air. It was more than just a warning. It was a statement of defiance ingrained in every fiber of a man who had dedicated his life to this land. Jesse felt the weight of Tom's words. He shouted, but even that declaration rang hollow. Behind it, doubt lingered and began to seep through their bravado. Suddenly, bang! A nightmarish sound erupted from behind Tom, jolting everyone into frantic action. Max, Tom's loyal dog, emerged from the shadows with a ferocity that could shake the earth, barking wildly, ready to defend his master. The sight of the massive dog charged the atmosphere with a new fear. Jesse gasped, stumbling back. "He's my protector and you're trespassing," Tom declared. He had a plan, one that would exploit the power of loyalty and spirit that radiated from his sidekick. The shadows of the barn bathed the scene in a ghostly light, and Jesse weighed his options, summoning the last of his courage. "We can take him." He barked at his crew, but his fear was palpable. They stood there, vacillating between their desires and the reality of the fierce man and dog before them. "Make your choice," Tom said, his voice low and unwavering. He had faced the worst of nature, and he refused to back down now. Seizing the moment, he grabbed a nearby shovel, brandishing it with purpose. Max growled at the outlaws, baring his teeth, a fierce protector prepared to fight. Jesse finally shouted, and the gang's momentum shifted. The bravado that had once propelled them faltered as they turned to flee, sprinting away in an explosion of panic and fear, leaving behind the bags they had filled. As the dingy night enveloped them, Tom felt relief wash over him, but it was quickly replaced by a simmering anger. He was seething, heart racing. They had almost undone everything he had worked for. Before he could second-guess himself, adrenaline propelled him forward. He hollered, reclaiming the space with each word. The sound echoed through the fields, mingling with the stillness of the night. Max settled down beside Tom, panting but watchful, the moment of danger seeming to pass. Inside, Tom's heart thrummed with a mixture of anger and victory. He had defended his home, fought off trouble that dared to trespass upon his life's work. Yet the world settled back into the ordinary sounds of the farm returned, calm and quiet. But that was not enough for Tom. He couldn't shake the feeling that more trouble could come. After all, thieves didn't just vanish. He quickly reached for his phone, his fingers trembling as he recounted the events to the sheriff. "Sheriff, it's Tom Turner. I just had a run-in with a gang of outlaws," he reported, trying to steady his voice. "They tried to rob me, but I scared them off with my dog. You need to send someone over." The sheriff listened carefully, assuring Tom that help was on the way. "You did the right thing, Tom. Most wouldn't stand their ground like you did. Just keep your eyes peeled. It might not be over," he said before hanging up. The words resonated deeply with Tom. The thrill of confrontation rang through his senses, awakening a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he possessed. He walked back to the barn, surveying the chaos left behind, the bags the outlaws had collected, scattered across the ground. With a steady determination, he started returning what they'd tried to take, slowly stacking the goods back into place. But it wasn't just about restoring order. It was about reclaiming his peace and resilience. He decided he wouldn't merely fortify his belongings but prepare for an inevitable return of the outlaws. After all, they were desperate men, and desperation had a way of twisting courage into recklessness. Over the next few days, while the town buzzed with tales of the notorious outlaws and their bold attempts, Tom turned the chaos into action. Inspired by his own bravery, he developed a plan of his own, a way to protect his home and send a clear message to anyone else who thought twice about meddling with what was his. That evening, he gathered materials from around his farm, working tirelessly through the night. Rope, wood, and metal began to create something more, an unexpected barrier, a clever edge defense for the farm. Each knot tied with care, every beam erected with purpose, was imbued with a fierce determination. Word had spread about the attempted robbery. He knew he wasn't alone in this fight. His neighbors gathered to lend a hand, recognizing the strength in unity. Together, they fortified the barn, securing the entryways, constructing barriers that would stand strong against any threat. As they worked, laughter and camaraderie filled the air, a palpable spirit of resilience intertwining with determination. Stories were shared about similar experiences, each tale reinforcing the bond among them. As they finished reinforcing the barn that night, Tom felt a deep wave of gratitude. Days turned into weeks and the harvest season arrived, bringing waves of joy and hope. The barn, now a fortified stronghold, gleamed under the sun, vibrant with the produce of hard work. But Tom remained alert, watching over his land, knowing that those outlaws could return at any moment. One night, as the wind howled and clouds shrouded the moon, that feeling settled in again, curling around his spine. Max was restless, pacing by the door, sensing the unease that permeated the air. Suddenly, the rustling began, the unmistakable sound of riders approaching. Tom's heart raced as he felt the adrenaline surge, the worst of his fears materializing. He grabbed a flashlight and made his way to the barn door, instinctively alerting Max to his side. "Stay close, boy," he whispered, aware of the power of partnership. Through the cracks in the door, he spotted shadows moving deftly through the rows of his crops, no doubt Jesse and his gang. The evening had returned to that grave silence, the stillness broken only by the anxiety creeping into Tom's gut. They had returned, emboldened by their previous near escape. He waited, patient and resolute, as the outlaws approached the barn, the weight of their intentions heavy in the air. This time they would not find him unprepared. Tom flipped the lights on, illuminating the barn's entryway as the gang came into view. Jesse shouted, incredulity mixing with anger. Tom replied, his voice unwavering. Jesse's bravado faded as he felt the imminent tension encircle them. He shouted, though the argument wavered, lacking conviction. Tom steadied his stance. "You think you're entitled to something you have no right to." Before Jesse could respond, Max stepped forward, barking ferociously. The smell of fear enveloped the outlaws, the hesitation palpable as they shuffled. This time, Tom had a trick up his sleeve. Nearby, he triggered a set of alarms, and soon a cacophony erupted, a series of loud noises emanating that echoed across the landscape. Jesse yelled, glancing nervously around. Without waiting for a moment's hesitation, Tom took a step forward, unwavering. His words ricocheted through the night, each syllable driven by the weight of past grievances. Time stood still, the world holding its breath as the outlaws weighed their options. With the barn lights glaring and the sound of impending chaos foreshadowing a fall from grace, it was clear. These weren't the fearless men they had once been. In a flash, Jesse's bravado melted away. "We should have never come back," he muttered, retreating into the shadow. The rest of the gang quickly followed suit, dragging their heels as they fled back into the darkness. As they galloped away, a wave of relief washed over Tom, adrenaline coursing through him once more. It had been a true test of resilience, but he had stood firm. Max's growl faded, and Tom felt a triumphant smile spread across his face. "Good boy," he whispered, patting Max's head as they surveyed the empty field. That night, as weary stars twinkled above, Tom took a moment to reflect. He was more than a farmer. He was a guardian of his land, standing tall against the darkness. The lessons of bravery from before continued to echo within him, and he knew he would always defend what was his with every ounce of strength. The world around him glimmered with possibilities, the horizon painted with the essence of hard work, labor, and family. No outlaw could ever take that away from him. With the dawn of each new day came the promise of more, revealing the true heart of a farmer not just surviving but thriving against all odds. He was ready come what may. The sun was setting on the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields of the Turner farm. It was a picturesque scene, complete with golden cornstalks swaying gently in the evening breeze. But beneath this serene surface, danger was lurking. 4 men huddled just outside the fence line, their faces illuminated by the last light of day. Jesse, the leader, looked at the old barn with eyes filled with greed. He felt a surge of excitement. "There's plenty in there for all of us," he said, his voice low but electric with anticipation. "Tonight we'll take what they've worked for." The Turner farm had been in Tom's family for generations. It was more than land. It was home, a place filled with memories of hard work, laughter, and love. Tom was not just any farmer, he was a man of grit, molded by the land he cared for. As he finished his chores for the day, wiping sweat from his brow, Tom sensed something was off. It was quiet, too quiet. The usual sounds of the evening, the croaking of frogs and the gentle rustle of leaves, felt muted. His instincts kicked in. He glanced out toward the barn, where a tinge of unease gnawed at him. Was someone watching? Just then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Jesse and his gang slipping through the cornfield. Tom's heart raced. Thieves, he thought. There was no mistaking their intent. He couldn't let them take what he had spent years building. As they crept closer, Tom decided to act. He didn't have much, just a shotgun that had seen better days, but it was enough. He moved quickly and quietly, cradling the weapon in his arms as he slipped into the shadows of the barn. The wood creaked beneath him, but he was determined. Jesse turned to his crew, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get ready, boys." Tom could hear their muffled laughter, the confidence that comes from being unseen. But he knew this would soon change. He could outsmart them if he played it right. He waited for the sound of their footsteps to draw closer, heart racing, adrenaline surging. When Jesse finally stepped into the barn, he froze. There was Tom, eyes blazing, shotgun raised. Tom demanded, his voice low but commanding. Jesse's bravado faltered for a split second as he registered the scene before him. "We didn't mean any harm," he lied, desperately trying to maintain his composure. Tom took a step forward, unwavering. "This isn't just something, this is everything I've worked for." The tension hung tightly in the air. Jesse glanced back at his friends, uncertainty creeping into his voice. Many might underestimate Tom, but the rugged man before them wasn't just a farmer. He had faced storms that could tear roofs from houses and droughts that burned away entire seasons. He wasn't backing down now. "You don't know what I'm capable of." Christopher, one of Jesse's men, shifted uneasily. "Maybe we should go," he whispered, his bravado failing under Tom's fierce gaze. Jesse barked back. "No." His defiance echoed off the barn walls, but his certainty had begun to waver. Every passing second fortified Tom's resolve, the weight of the situation filling the space like a heavy fog. In that moment, something snapped inside Tom. He could see how frightened Jesse's men were, their bravado just a facade for insecurity. "You have no idea what it's like to care for something, to fight for it with all your strength," he said, slowly lowering his weapon but keeping it ready. "Leave while you can." At that, Jesse lunged forward, hoping to catch Tom off guard. But as he did, Tom flipped a switch on a loud alarm system he had installed earlier that week. The cacophony that erupted startled all of them, the sound ricocheting through the barn like thunder. The noise echoed in the night, jolting Jesse and his crew into a panic. One of them shouted, glancing toward the barn entrance. "Something you clearly underestimated," Tom replied, his voice steady as Max, his loyal dog, emerged from the shadows, barking fiercely. The Outlaws were now set on edge, their confidence completely shattered. Chaos erupted, with Jesse grabbing at the air as if to defend against the sound itself. He yelled, a note of desperation creeping in. Tom seized the moment, stepping forward. He shouted. With the alarm blaring and Max growling beside him, the Outlaws scrambled backward, realizing they had underestimated Tom and the surprise he had waiting for them. They fumbled over each other as they frantically backtracked, crashing into crates and knocking over equipment. Jesse barked, clutching his men as they turned and raced toward the door. But there was still one final surprise. Outside the barn, Tom had set up a net trap, something he had learned about while prepping for intruders long before this night. As the Outlaws dashed toward freedom, they stumbled right into it, the net ensnaring their legs and sending them tumbling to the ground. Tom couldn't help but smile, a fierce sense of triumph washing over him as Jesse fell backward, his bravado shattered by the very trap Tom had been ready to spring. "Caught you like a fish," Tom said, lowering his voice as he stepped out into the moonlight, the barrel of his shotgun pointed down just enough to show he meant business. The sound of the alarm faded, but the effects of it lingered, pounding in the chests of those men. Jesse lay tangled in the net, eyes wild. He spat, though the fire in his voice dimmed with each word. "It is for you. "I'd suggest you rethink your life choices," Tom replied, surveying the mess before him with newfound clarity. Christopher pleaded, his voice laced with fear. Tom took a deep breath, considering their words. He asked, the weight of the situation circling around him. Jesse shot back, desperation replacing anger. Their pleas echoed around the barn, but Tom felt conflicted. He understood struggle, he had lived it, but theft and deceit didn't sit well with him. "You're lucky I don't call the sheriff right now, but instead I'll give you a chance. Leave now and don't come back." With that, he lowered the net gently, carefully untangling them enough that they could free themselves, though in reality, the act was about teaching a greater lesson. The outlaws clambered from beneath the net, a mix of embarrassment and anger painting their faces as they dashed for the cornfields. Tom shouted one last time as they scrambled away, their figures disappearing into the dark of night. Just like that, the threat receded, the danger dissipating into the soft rustle of leaves. Tom let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding, relief flooding over him. Max bounded to his side, tail wagging, a proud protector reveling in the victory. Tom knelt down beside him, running a hand through his fur. "Good boy." The next few days were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Tom worked tirelessly, fortifying the barn and ensuring against any future intrusions. But he also extended a hand to his neighbors, sharing the story of his encounter with the outlaws. Word spread quickly through the community, their backs straightening with pride. The tale of the beleaguered farmer facing off against desperate men resonated with everyone. They came together in support, friends and neighbors rallied to help reinforce his property, share tools, and ensure everyone felt safe. Tom saw the power of unity grow around him. The community was more than just the land and its crops. They were a collective heartbeat, harmonizing in rhythm and spirit. Weeks passed and Tom continued to thrive, the harvest strong and the land flourishing under his care. But he never let his guard down. He remained vigilant, knowing that challenges could arise at any moment. One chilly evening as he prepared for winter, the familiar sensation prickled at his neck. This time, however, it wasn't just the feeling of a cold wind. He could sense something was amiss, and it drew his gaze toward the road. In the distance, he spotted figures gathering near the entrance to his farm. His heart sank. It was Jesse and his crew, the very outlaws who had tried to rob him before. But now they weren't alone. They were accompanied by others, more men he didn't recognize. Tom gripped the shovel he had been using, heart racing, the darkness creeping around him like a suffocating shroud. He stepped outside, Max by his side, whispering words of reassurance. "Stay close," he said softly. As the men approached, a new layer of tension filled the air. Jesse stepped forward, looking less cocky and more nervous as he regarded Tom. "We just want to talk, man," he said, but the edge of desperation laced his voice. Tom replied, his resolve steady. "We're in trouble," Jesse admitted, glancing behind him as if expecting something terrible to happen. "We need your help." Tom considered his options. He had faced them once before, now they were begging for mercy. He remembered the lesson he had learned. Sometimes strength lies in understanding and the ability to rise above the past. But could he trust them? He asked, keeping a tight grip on his shovel. "Because if you don't, you could be putting yourself in danger too." "We're being hunted," Jesse added, glancing back again, fear shadowing his words. Maybe it was the desperation in their eyes, or maybe it was because Tom remembered his own struggles, but a flicker of compassion welled up within him. He asked cautiously, eyeing them closely. "We need a place to hide until we can figure this out," Jesse admitted, shame coloring his cheeks. As conflicted as he felt, Tom saw a chance for redemption, not just for them but for himself. "If I agree, there'll be no stealing and no lies," he said firmly. Tom could see the glint of hope spark in Jesse's eyes. "We won't let you down." Tom nodded, understanding that perhaps this was the surprise he had been destined to unveil. A second chance not just for those outlaws, but a lesson in courage and mercy he could teach. As they retreated to the barn, Tom had no idea how this unexpected twist of fate would come to redefine him. He no longer faced challenges as just a farmer but as a protector, standing strong beside those who sought redemption. Each crack in the walls of the barn seemed to whisper of victory, survival and redemption, a tapestry woven together by trials faced, and battles fought in the name of something greater than any one man. As night descended, Tom felt the warmth of unity surround him, a collective spirit rising, echoing the strength that coursed through the very land he had spent his life defending. Forever intertwined, they would learn that the heart of the farmer beat not just for the soil, but for humanity. Life on the farm would never be the same again, or perhaps it would be just as it always had been, filled with surprise, resilience, and the undying spirit to defend what we hold dear. The moon hung high in the midnight sky, casting eerie shadows across the quiet fields of the Turner farm. It was an idyllic country scene, but that night something sinister was creeping closer. With every rustle of the wind, 4 silhouettes moved stealthily through the tall grass, their hearts thrumming with anticipation. They were outlaws, drawn together by desperation and reckless ambition. Jesse, their leader, grinned as he caught a glimpse of the old barn ahead, its wooden walls weathered but sturdy. "Tonight, we'll feast like kings," he whispered, fingers twitching at the thought of plunder. Little did they know, while they plotted their heist, Tom Turner was working late in the barn, the familiar rhythm of his evening routine grounding him. He hummed softly to himself, a gentle counterpoint to the darkening world outside. Farming was never easy. Each season brought its own blessings and burdens. But this farm was more than land to Tom. It was home, a legacy sewn together with sweat, love, and hard-earned victories. Tom paused as he felt a shift in the air, a prickling sensation at the nape of his neck. Instinctively, he closed his eyes, focusing on the sounds of the night. There it was again, a faint rustling. He opened his eyes and stepped out of the barn, allowing the cool breeze to kiss his skin. Against the horizon, shadows flickered and his heart sank. Not tonight, he thought resolutely. With a determined grip, he reached for the crowbar he kept handy for repairs, its weight familiar in his hands. The world quieted as Tom peered into the tall grass, adrenaline surging through him. As the outlaws approached, they expected an easy score. Their laughter echoed, an intoxicating mix of bravado and naivete. "Let's get what we came for," Jesse urged, leading the way into the barn, his eyes glinting with greed. But Tom was waiting. As they stumbled into the dim light, he stepped forward, crowbar raised. He shouted, his voice booming like thunder, startling even him. What happened next was a matter of heart, a clash of lives lived under different banners. The outlaws stood frozen, the bravado on Jesse's face evaporating. He stammered, eyes darting. Tom echoed, taking a step closer, muscles taut with resolve. "What are you doing?" The tension was tangible, an electrifying charge humming in the air. Tom stood firm, the weight of his past flickering behind him, years of toil, heartache, and triumph condensed into a single moment. "I've worked too hard for this place," he added, his voice steady. "You're leaving now." Jesse, sensing his men faltering, made one last desperate push. He shouted, desperation layered thick over his tone, but Tom's eyes burned with something deeper than fear. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he replied, his grip tightening on the crowbar. He wasn't just a farmer. He'd faced storms that could tear roofs from buildings and droughts that turned rich soil into dust. He wouldn't let anyone strip away the life he had built. In the silence that followed, the outlaws hesitated, eyeing each other. Tom could see their confidence crumbling, fear taking root where there had been cocky bravado just moments earlier. Just then, a low growl erupted behind him. Max, his loyal dog, sprang into action, teeth bared, ready to protect his master. The scene turned electric. The outlaws recoiled, uncertainty flooding their eyes. Jesse shouted, panic beginning to creep in. "It's your worst nightmare," Tom replied, stepping forward with renewed strength. "This farm isn't just land, it's my life." And then it happened. As Jesse lunged forward with a knife, Tom swung the crowbar, the two colliding with a resounding clang. But the struggle had just begun. The barn stood as a witness to the chaotic confrontation. The outlaws stumbled back, their bravado shattered. Screams echoed, and as they turned to flee, Tom chased them through the barn doors, adrenaline surging, the smell of hay and sweat mingling with the bitter scent of desperation. "Get out!" he shouted, the words pouring from his soul, heavy with years of labor. Outside, the cool night air rushed against their faces, but chaos was unfurling in their wake. The outlaws bolted toward the tree line, shadows slipping between the trunks like whispers. They didn't know that Tom had set up defenses, preparations for trouble rooted deep in the soil. A tripwire strung between two trees snapped taut just as Jesse reached it, sending him tumbling to the ground, caught like a fly in a web. What the he gasped. Even in their panic, Tom couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction, a spark of adrenaline igniting his spirit. He shouted, heart racing. The others stumbled, glancing back at Jesse as he struggled, tangled in the ropes. Christopher demanded, fear etched into his features. Leave him. Jesse yelled, America's voice full of desperation. The panic led them back towards the barn, but they weren't prepared for Tom's final surprise. Tom had rigged up an old alarm system that blared like a siren, sending a shockwave of noise through the night. One of the outlaws shouted, eyes wide with confusion. Jesse barked, pushing forward, but Max lunged at them, barking ferociously, preventing any escape. Not so fast, Tom declared, stepping into the light, crowbar raised. The gleam of determination in his eyes was unmistakable. You wanted to take what's mine. Just then, the unmistakable sound of hooves echoed in the distance, galloping horses approaching fast. Tom's heart raced with a mix of hope and urgency. He had called the sheriff, anticipating trouble, but he hadn't expected to be in the thick of it. Jesse's crew saw the lights in the distance, panic flooding their features. One of them screamed. Tom seized the moment. In the face of the tumult, the outlaws hesitated, glancing at each other. Jesse, still trapped, struggled against the rope. He shouted, trying to project an illusion of power, the panic bubbling beneath the surface. Christopher urged, his voice quivering. Tom watched as the fear rose in Jesse's eyes. He was cornered, trapped by his own choices. And then it happened. Just as Jesse stood up, desperate to escape, the sheriff and his deputy broke through the tree line, horses snorting and galloping hard. The sheriff called out, surveying the scene with authority. Tom raised his crowbar slightly, heart pounding. The sheriff's eyes shifted to Jesse, who was still struggling, tangled up in Tom's handiwork. The sight of him, an outlaw trapped in a web of desperation, painted a vivid picture of consequence. But then, as the moonlight glinted off the sheriff's badge, he turned back to Tom, brows furrowing. He asked, assessing the situation. Tom felt a wave of defiance surge through him. I will if they choose to back off, he replied firmly, casting a glance at Jesse and the others, their bravado stripped away. The outlaws glanced from Tom to the sheriff, now realizing how precarious their position had become. Suddenly, something shifted in the air, a sense of panic, confusion, and desperation swirling like a storm around them. And then it hit, the realization of their choices sinking in. Jesse shouted, "We're not just going to walk away." The sheriff stepped forward, hand resting on his sidearm. "You're going to leave now or face the consequences." The moment hung in the air like a thread ready to snap. Max growled softly beside Tom, a constant reminder of the stakes at hand. Jesse clenched his jaw, weighing his options, fear and anger battling within him. He spat. Before Tom could react, Jesse turned and bolted into the dark, his men following suit. In the blink of an eye, they had vanished into the shadows, leaving only the echoes of their chaotic exit behind. As the night settled back into quiet, Tom felt a mix of relief and uncertainty lingering in the air. The sheriff asked, stepping closer. "I'm fine," Tom replied, though tension knotted in his gut. "But I don't think this is over." The sheriff nodded, a serious expression washing over his features. "I'll have more patrols on this area." Yet even as Tom appreciated the gesture, a gnawing feeling remained. The outlaws were desperate, cornered animals, and nothing was more dangerous than one who had nothing left to lose. "Thanks for being here," Tom said finally. As Tom watched the sheriff leave, he felt the weight of his choices deepening. He knew he needed to fortify his defenses, mentally and physically. He shook his head, a fierce sense of determination blooming inside him. But just then, a flicker of movement caught his eye. From the shadows of the cornfields emerged a figure, slender and cloaked in darkness. Tom squinted, heart racing once more. He called out, gripping the crowbar tightly. The figure stepped forward, revealing a familiar face twisted with a mix of desperation and fury. It was Jesse. With a practiced motion, Jesse raised a weapon, a gleaming pistol aimed squarely at Tom. He sneered, voice laced with anger. "I'm just getting started." As the reality of the moment crashed down, Tom's pulse quickened, his world narrowing to the figure before him. He stood on the precipice of danger, not knowing how this standoff would end. In that fleeting second, every hard-earned lesson collided with the imminent threat, the line between safety and survival blurring as the night stretched into an uncertain horizon. A flicker of resolve ignited within him. Whatever happened next, he would not back down. He was a farmer, a protector of his legacy, willing to fight until the last breath. And in this critical moment, everything he had built was about to collide with the chaos of a heart desperate for revenge. "Let's settle this," Tom said, his voice low and steady, as shadows danced around them, teetering on the brink of a storm. The stakes had never been higher, and the night had just begun to unveil its most dangerous surprise yet.